Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. And we'll get to the JRC here in just a moment, folks. But first, real briefly, disclaimers. If you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, all pertinent links can be found right there in the description box. That way, should you want to deep dive on either subject, you'll absolutely be able to go ahead and do so. Trigger warning. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. Of course, I use profanity. I use it a lot. And also, when we talk about places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. So if you got a child that is 16 and younger and they are watching this, parental supervision very much advised, alright? Okay, so where we left off the other day, and though it has an attachment, they also have a comment. Thank God, because I don't want to read another novel. So let's go ahead and read it. This is actually coming from the ARC in New York. So, the ARC of New York applauds the proposed rule and agrees with the FDA's assertion that these devices present an unreasonable and substantial risk of illness or injury that cannot be corrected or eliminated by labeling. We agree with the FDA's finding that the ESDs are not only ineffective at reducing self-injurious or aggressive behavior, but also pose an unreasonable risk of significant physical and psychological harm. It is precisely because of these harms that virtually every health provider in the nation rejects their use, which is practiced only by a single institution, the Judge Rotenberg Center in Canton, Massachusetts. We also agree with the FDA's findings that no evidence produced since the finalization of the 2020 rule banning the use of ESDs warrants any substantial revision of the FDA's prior analysis. So, in spite of what that one person said, if you remember, where they said that we get this study from Walden U, and remember what we found out about that study? That as a matter of fact, Walden U actually pays for 0 grants towards clinical studies because they are a primarily online campus. They have a very small building. Believe out in Minnesota, do not quote me on that. But that's pretty much it. Everything else is online. So that study was actually a whole bunch of freaking garbage. So, what the ARC of New York is saying is 100% correct. And by the way, if I'm going to choose to listen to either a place like the JRC or the ARC, who is hands down the largest provider of services for disabled and elderly people, I'm going to go with the ARC. I'm just saying. Saying is all. Alright, let's go here. Alright, this one says, the practice of electroshock therapy on autistic adults for alleged aggression is inhumane and should be stopped. Point blank. Point blank, folks. It's really that simple. It truly, really, in all reality is that simple. Right? Alright, let's take a look at a few more of these here. Alright, here's another short one. Using electric therapy has been showcased to do all harm and no good. Putting it blunt, gotta like it. Gotta like it. I am fully in support of banning the use of these devices, especially when they are meant to be used on children and adolescents. And somebody please talk about the voltage, because that is completely insane. Alright, we're going to read the next one here. How can electric shock treatment still be in use in the 21st century? Thank you. Thank you, somebody said it other than me. This is 2025 here, and we are still having people defend literal human shock collars here. And trying to tell us no, that we're the ones that are actually wrong, and we're the ones who are trying to hurt those kids. And this is the only thing that's going to save them. And why don't we understand? Because if the only way to stop violence is more violence, I don't want a part of it. It really is that simple. And me having a label should not change that. Nor should it change the level of consent and autonomy that I have over my own body. But those kids weren't like you. The hell they're not. The hell they're not. I was them a long time ago. You cannot judge an autistic child by the measurement of an autistic adult because we've had the benefits of what is known as time. We've had the chance to evolve, to learn, to develop, to get our services, to bring us to the point where we are now that enable us to do the things that we are able to do. If you were to take a time machine and go back and watch me, then you would see your child. Parents, I need you to start expressing a little bit of logic, a little bit of some practical reasoning here. Okay? Oh, we just read that one. Sorry, folks. Alright, we're going to go to the next one here. Here we go. This inhumane treatment of individuals with mental issues must end. First off, for the last damn time, autism is not a mental illness. It is a developmental disorder. Now, I know because we are in the MSM-5. Sorry. Blah. Long day. Just because we are in the MSM-5 does not mean that our diagnosis is a mental disorder. It is not. It is a developmental disorder. Developmental delay, whatever terminology you are most comfortable with, that's what it is. Okay? Odd. Now, a lot of us also have accompanying mental health issues, definitely. But autism in and of itself is not a mental health issue. It is a developmental issue. Okay? God, that gets old. You have no idea how many times I've had to have that conversation. Alright, let's read this next one. I support banning the use of these devices to correct, air quotes, gotta love it, self-injurious or aggressive behavior, since there is a lack of evidence that these devices are effective and a lot of evidence that these devices harm patients. I think the original FDA decision to ban these devices was correct, and the FDA should reinstate this ban with the new court ruling. Go off, and do it now. Very obviously, if you look at the comments as we continue on here, the majority are in favor for banning this insanity. Which means, in the real world, there's no debate. Everybody's pretty unanimous. Right? Which makes it crazy confusing on how the JRC is able to have this much pull to make people believe there's still a debate here. There very obviously isn't one. Alright, I'm going to read this here. It says, I am a doctoral student in clinical psychology and supporting banning electrical stimulation devices for aggressive and self-injurious behavior. They are inhumane, often ineffective at redirecting behaviors, and generate the preferred response, and there are other ways to deal with injurious or aggressive behaviors. Rewards for abstinence, restraint if necessary, PRN analytics, prevention strategies. Electric shock is painful, unethical, and ineffective. Go off. And you gotta love it, because now we have another person getting their doctorate from clinical psychology who can go toe-to-toe with the other person saying, I fully believe in this. The majority of the medical profession doesn't agree with you. Quite frankly, tells me all I really need to know. Alright, so This one here says, I am an autistic and have other mental and physical disabilities. I want the FDA to pass a rule banning the use of electric shock devices for behavioral modification. Disabled people need to be respected as fellow humans. We need to be listened to and accommodated as peers. When we autistic folks are allowed to self-regulate with self-stimulation and other non-painful tools, we can hopefully stop hurting ourselves. And also to that point, don't always assume that self-harm is always necessarily a stim. It is for some of us, but not all of us. Even when younger, where my primary stim is like the leg shaking that drives my mom ever closer to insanity. It never caused me physical pain. When I would call into self-harm was always in meltdown. Always in meltdown. Okay? Or when a mental health issue would trigger something off, which, as I've gotten therapy over the years, has definitely gotten less and less, thank God, because it was horrific when I was younger. Alright, let's go back to where we were. Alright, this one says, behavior modification through painful shocks is barbarism and should not be supported by the market. Go off! Love to see it. Or at least I do. Alright, let me continue. Pet owners sometimes use vibrating collars to keep their animals in proximity. I can't imagine being attached to a device that at any moment might vibrate or shock me, especially because of the behavior that is often misunderstanding or compulsion. There's a lot of things about human behavior that even I analyze inside myself. And there is a compulsion aspect to it. If I am triggered in a particular way, I'm going to have a particular default response to it. And it is so hardwired that it doesn't matter how many times you try to show me a different behavior to replace it with. If it's a crisis situation, I'm going to do the default model, that operating system that I already have. So that compulsion is not something I can control. What you can control is minimize how many times you set off those triggers once you find out what they are, which takes time. And I know for a fact that neither a shock from a device 3 more times powerful than a police taser is not going to get the job done. It will provoke a violent reaction though. Especially coming from myself already having PTSD. You want to talk about a quick way to ignite my fight or flight response? Yeah, do that. Fuck around and find out. Activate my Hulk smash gene. See what happens. For a very small person, I can do a lot of damage. That's all I can say. My heart aches for anyone who got a device like this used against them. Same. If I ever seen it in front of me, my ass is going to jail. Just know I'm going to jail. Alright, this ban is a great thing. Please ban these devices. Shock collars have no place in healthcare or childcare. Preach it! Most nonsensical thing I've seen, and coming from me, that's kind of saying something. This one says, block that electric therapy. I was under the impression that we already did. This is barbaric and cruel. We did, and then they overturned it. Because JRC somehow has this immense amount of power that I've never seen a single entity like them be able to wield before. It completely blows my mind. CEOs wielding it, that I would expect. This tiny little school wielding the same amount of power continues to break my brain. It makes no coherent sense, and it really makes me want to start doing the digging to get to the bottom of how the hell are they able to do this? Hoodwink the federal government. Just get everybody to do as they want. I've never seen anything like it. Like, for real. Alright, so this one says, ban ESDs for SIB and AB and expanded use stop conversion therapy for members of the LGBTQIA as soon as you can, please. Please go off, Trevor Project. Go off. You want a megaphone? I'll get one. Alright, here we go. Alright, this one states, the very concept of using electrical shocks to deter self-injurious behavior is already hypocritical and repugnant. Thank you. By God. You shouldn't need to shock individuals to get a point across. That's not a teaching moment or anything. It's just abuse, if not straight up torture. I'm going to punish you for having a behavior that I know you can't control, because otherwise you'll hurt yourself, is one of the most illogical sentences I've ever heard, and it sure as hell has no place inside the year of our Lord 2025, okay? Please ban conversion therapy. It does no good and nothing more than a legal method of torture for people who are deemed different. If y'all would just leave us misfits alone, we'd appreciate it, right? We didn't bang on your door like we're the cops demanding your opinions on these matters, NTs. Alright, this one says electroshock devices are a form of torture, and the FDA is correct in that they need to be outlawed. The whole thing needs to be shut down. Their entire so-called treatment program needs to be made illegal. You know? Just my opinion. We're going to go here. Alright, so this one's a little bit of a longer one. It says, to whom it may concern, as an autistic board-certified behavioral analyst, BCBA with a PhD in special education and applied behavior analysis, I am writing to provide my professional perspective on the proposed rule to ban the electric shock devices for self-injurious and aggressive behavior. I strongly support the ban on ESDs. Number 1, ethical considerations. ESDs raise significant ethical concerns due to documented physical and psychological harm. Using aversive stimuli as behavior intervention contradicts the ethical guidelines established by the Behavioral Analyst Certification Board, BACB, which emphasize the importance of client dignity and the use of least restrictive evidence-based practices. Ineffectiveness and harm. I would get into my usual ABA rant, but we'll save it for the series, right? Research indicates that ESDs are not only ineffective in the long term, but also carry a high risk of adverse effects, including increased aggression, anxiety, and trauma. Yep, the more trauma we get, the worse those particular parts of our diagnosis get as well. Funny how that works, right? Evidence-based behavioral interventions such as positive behavioral support, PBS, can we please call it the umbrella term it is and quit referring to positive behavioral support as though it's its own treatment program, because it isn't. It is called positive behavioral reinforcement. Do not make me find you all. And if you have changed the language, maybe make those of us who are stuck out here in the mainstream aware of it. Because otherwise, it's just going to keep driving me insane. And functional communication training, FCT, have demonstrated superior efficacy in reducing self-injurious and aggressive behavior without the associated risks of aversive methods. By the way, y'all see me doing the twisting here? This is stimming. Am I hurting anybody? No. Why am I doing it? It's a compulsion. Do I wish to stop? No. This is a step. Twisting back and forth. Or the one I usually do in public, which is a whole lot of this. I like the pressure. I know, it's weird. Anyways. 3. Advocacy for safer alternatives. As an advocate for individuals with disabilities, it is imperative that we prioritize interventions that promote safety, dignity, and well-being. Interventions grounded in applied behavior analysis, ABA, such as differential reinforcement and skill-building techniques, provide humane and effective alternatives to adverse procedures. Sure you do, Jan. The adoption of such methods aligns contemporary best practices and evolving standards of care in behavior analysis. It doesn't make sense that you are trying to make us learn behaviors so that they'll replace the ones that we have, where you know damn well if we're in crisis, we're going to go back to our factory default setting. You can't just drill in another behavior into our heads. You do not understand. We are not neurotypical. It's not going to take in a crisis situation. But it will just become automatic, like you didn't even know it happened. No, it won't. I'm 40. I can tell you. No, it won't. It is still unnatural. It is still be acting. It is still a mask. It is not natural to me. It takes a ridiculous amount of mental effort to make it look as though it is easy to me. So, can we stop that, please? Okay? One of the major problems with ABA that they refuse to recognize or admit. Alright. Let me go on to number 4, professional and public health responsibility. The FDA's proposed ban on ESDs reflects a critical step in protecting vulnerable populations and upholding the integrity of therapeutic practices. By endorsing this ban, the FDA supports the advancement of ethical and effective behavior intervention strategies, fostering a safer and more compassionate approach to behavioral health care. In conclusion, I strongly support the FDA's proposed rule to ban electrical stimulation devices for self-injurious and aggressive behavior. This action is necessary to safeguard the rights and well-being of individuals with disabilities and promote the use of ethical, evidence-based interventions with the field of behavior analysis and beyond. And of course, they have all that put down here. Very well said, but yeah, me and ABA are not friends. And you'll find out why. We will eventually get to that series. Alright. We've got 3 more to go. Alright, so we're going to read this one here. It says, I am horrified to discover the use of barbaric physical torture has continued to be accepted as means of controlling helpless children and adults legally in the United States. Go off. This is comparable to some of the worst abuses of the past, which we pride ourselves as a nation for having transcended. It is imperative that the use of the electric shock devices be made illegal as soon as possible. Please do. Go off. Go all the way off to bar. Alright, let's read this one here. It says, I am autistic person, disabilities rights advocate, and human services worker. As a lifelong Massachusetts resident, my condolences. I am deeply ashamed that the use of painful shocks to change behavior is still occurring in my state, and I urge the FDA to pass a rule that would ban the use of electric shock devices for behavioral modification. The use of electric skin shock is extremely cruel, causing injury and lasting trauma to people it is used on. Disabled people at the Rotenberg Center in Canton, Massachusetts are subject to shocks more powerful than a taser for the most trivial reasons, such as taking off their coat and raising their hands. The use of aversives, including shock for behavioral modification, has been soundly rejected by the behavior modification community. Proponents of shock claim that nothing else can help seriously self-injuring people, which is a lie, by the way. A lie. The math doesn't math. Do not make me talk about math. You will not make me happy and tease. However, scores of people with severe self-injury have been successfully treated without inflicting pain. Positive methods that do not cause severe pain are an industry standard, making the use of shock completely unnecessary. Please ban shock devices for behavior modification. Alright, now we're going to go to our last comment for this one, folks. Alright, here we go. This one says, electric shock therapy should have been banned a long time ago, and it is both risks harm and does not help to discover and treat the actual root causes of the self-injury. Thank you! Root cause is everything. You don't get to the root, you can't fix the branches. Let me say that again for the people in the back. If you don't get to the root, you can't do anything to fix the branches. Okay? The branches are just kind of there. Right? And the underlying issue may lie in the roots. If you don't get to the roots, all you're doing is treating the branches. You're not fixing anything. You're literally a glorified tree trimmer, which granted has its place. I mean, I do live in Tornado Alley, but you get my point. It should also never be available as an option for children or individuals who may be under guardianship and unable to give or revoke consent directly themselves, as it puts a vulnerable population in danger of harmful and painful therapy that they do not want, and this is extremely dangerous in situations of abusive parenting or when a child has difficulty communicating their wishes to their parents. Thank you! There is no consent. JRC, you are the last people on planet Earth, literally on planet Earth, that has the right to ever, at any time, be speaking about endangering the children. Okay? Of all things. Alright, folks, that's going to be good for now. We're going to go ahead and close out this afternoon. But before we do, we don't get very many views on this channel. And the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So if you would be so kind, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to get the comments. And make sure you're still set up to receive notifications. We're going to have our episode up tomorrow of the Down the Rabbit Hole series. We'll be continuing on with the Snake Oil Salesman series coming up this Sunday. I definitely don't want you missing anything. I appreciate your time, and as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely do. Hope you have a good one. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everyone.